Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Greg, for that introduction. And thank you, Tina and the Conference Planning Committee for inviting me to come. I promise I'll get you all out of here in time for the last round at Dave & Buster's, if not before. I know that introductions matter in terms of setting first impressions, so let me just start by taking a moment to share with you two very different first impressions that I had at two very different educational institutions. Now, the first was my impression when I started as a student at Harvard Law School. And one of the first things that we did was we were taken on a tour. And of course, it's a beautiful campus. It's a wonderful campus, very historic. And we went into the library. And I don't know about you, but I love libraries. I love books. And the librarian took us all around the library and was clearly so proud of everything. And of course, there are just rows and rows of books. And, some going back to the mists of antiquity. Even the dust had dust on it in some of the parts. And we got to one floor where there were all of the statutes for every state in the Union, basically every law. Of course, I'm sure this is all electronic now. But the librarian, with such obvious pride in her voice, said, on this floor we have every law of every state, in the Union, from A for Alabama to Y for Wyoming. And, I called my then girlfriend, now wife, and said, I don't think Harvard's going to be as tough as it's cracked up to be. Then, my first impression when I started as dean at University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, I had literally just been named the dean. Actually, we had arranged that with the president of the university, there was an email that went out, I think it was at 8:30 in the morning, to the law school saying that I had been named as dean. I was still teaching in Columbia. I was in New York at the time. And so right at 8:30, I started making calls to different faculty members, associate deans, et cetera, to tell them how much I was looking forward to being the dean. Literally my first call, I was calling the associate dean. He also happened to be the head of the library. This is not about libraries. I don't know why both of these. He wasn't there. The deputy librarian answered the phone. A wonderful woman, University of Detroit Mercy, it's a Catholic law school, and this was Sister Colleen. And so she answered the phone, and I said, hi, this is Mark Gordon. You might have just seen the email that I was just named as dean of the law school. Silence. Absolute silence for a long time. First thing she says is, you weren't my first choice. So I thought, boy, that honeymoon really lasted a long time, Now, while these first impressions can make for amusing stories, I think you all realize better than perhaps anyone how lasting first impressions also can be. And on behalf of college presidents everywhere, I want to take a moment to thank those of you who are high school guidance counselors for all of the efforts you make to encourage students to look past their first impressions, because you know how important that is. While I'm talking about high school guidance counselors, I also want to thank you. I know you are overworked and you are overloaded, but believe me, what you do makes a huge difference, because you know better than many how important it is to look beyond the surface to find out what an institution is really like. And frankly, I think that needs to go both ways, as colleges also need to look beyond the first impressions that grades and ACT scores and other kinds of tests provide. So while I'm thanking people, I also want to thank those of you who are in college admissions. If you work half as much as the people in college admissions at Defiance, I know you too are overworked and overloaded. And I know you also work to look beyond the first impressions, to look at the student as an individual who is so much more than just a few numbers on a piece of paper, an individual whose potential really cannot be truly measured by a series of tests. Now, let's be honest in admitting that one reason why colleges and prospective students and their parents look at easily quantifiable data is precisely that, because it is easy. The numbers are right there, and there is a surface, although false, appearance of objectivity in doing so. We all know that each of us in this room cannot be described accurately by a set of numbers. And the truth is that the same holds true for prospective college students and also for colleges themselves. Now, you know, my first experience with the dynamics of these kinds of first impressions came in terms of the rankings. And it came about 2 months into my first year, you know, last year as president at Defiance College. Because at that point, I heard from the head of our marketing department that the U.S. News rankings were about to be issued and that we had been notified that we had moved up a whole series of places in that first tier of Midwestern baccalaureate colleges. And you won't be surprised to know the marketing department had already prepared a press release, you know, about our improvement in the rankings, and they wanted me to approve the release. And they also, of course, wanted me to add, you know, those all-important, you know, triumphalist presidential-sounding quotes. I started talking with the marketing staff about to whom we should send the release, you know, how should we publicize the information and the like. And I started working on the quotes, you know, saying how proud we were, you know, that you all could write this with your eyes closed, right? How proud we were that the excellence of the college was being increasingly recognized. And then I stopped. You know, I stopped to think for a moment. If we had gone down in the rankings, would I really have felt that our decrease accurately reflected anything about the college? Of course not. Would I, you know, have put out a quote saying, gee, it's too bad, you know, the gig is up, everybody's figured out that we're really not as good as we think we are? Yeah. Did I really believe that this advance in the rankings said anything meaningful about our quality as a college? Honestly, no. In fact, as I said to the head of marketing, I honestly believed, and I still do, that the rankings really don't tell prospective students, or anyone else for that matter, much of anything about a college. In fact, I think they're more harmful than they are helpful, providing a veneer of objective quantification to a process that must, by its very nature, be ultimately a subjective one. After all, our college, like any other college in the country, is the perfect college for some students, but it's not the right college for every student. And rankings obscure that, and so much more. So instead of sending out that press release, I sat down and wrote a column for the local newspaper. And the headline that I put on it was, "Defiance College just shot up in the rankings, here's why you shouldn't care." I put that column on, thank you. I put that column on my blog, and then I instructed our marketing and admissions departments to act as if we really believed what I said in the column. And that meant getting rid of all the mentions on our website and in our admissions materials and things like that about how we were ranked. And frankly, I was astounded by the reaction, because I started to hear from guidance counselors and others all around the country who were praising me for just having stated the facts, for just having told the truth. You know, I won't bore you by reading all the emails I got, but they used words like courage and awesome, frankly, words that college presidents never, ever hear on their campuses. I was amazed because it seemed to me like all I was doing was speaking an obvious truth that we all recognize. Now, you know, I could spend a lot of time here today going point by point with you through the reasons why the rankings make no sense, and I'll make a couple of points like that. But, you know, let me take that back. Actually, they make a lot of sense for the magazines to put them out, like for U.S. News and World Report, which is in the business of selling magazines. So they make a lot of sense for them, and frankly, I don't think that we can attack them for meeting their business goals. But they make little sense for prospective students and their parents trying to find the college which is the right fit. So sometimes I think that we have actually directed our fire in the wrong direction. The fault, frankly, is not that of U.S. News or anybody else who puts out rankings. They are doing their job. The fault lies with us, who then permit our institutions to then start acting as if we needed to follow them and as if we needed to change what we're doing because of how that impacts how we stand in the rankings. You know, as a college president, each year I get in the mail, you know, the survey from U.S. News for me to fill out, you know, giving my peer assessment of scores of colleges. in the country. Now, I think I'm a pretty smart guy. But if anyone thinks that I can accurately assess all those colleges, they have got to be crazy. I doubt there is a college president in the country who has the knowledge to judge more than a handful of his or her fellow colleges accurately. That is, unless we use the only measure we have of reputation, which is how well colleges ranked in the previous year's U.S. News survey. So I think what happens with the peer assessment, frankly, is that we just keep feeding back to U.S. News whatever reputational ranking they just informed us about 6 months earlier. Now I'll tell you, when I get that ranking, that survey, I throw it in the garbage. And then I get another one that comes from U.S. News, and I throw that in the garbage. I'm not quite sure how much money I'm costing them in mailing. But if that was all there was to it, there would be relatively little harm done. But I think the problem really goes far deeper as you start looking at what it is that we pay attention to in rankings. One of the measures in the rankings is selectivity, right? This is intended to measure both the quality of those admitted and what % of those students who apply to a college get admitted, right? That is the acceptance rate. Now, I'm sure you all realize that any college can easily game this system. And actually, having been dean at a law school, I could actually have you in stitches talking about different ways that law schools have gamed the system with their rankings. If you want your acceptance rate to go up, of course, just try to encourage more applications from precisely those students whom you will not admit. And presto, you have now become a more selective college. Congratulations. But there's something far more pernicious, I think, that is going on here. Looking at a college's selectivity measures how good a college is, not by what happens at the college, not by the quality of education at the college, but rather by the quality of the students who go to the college before they even get there. So if you manage to attract students who have high ACTs or SATs or GPAs, I don't know why it's always sets of 3 letters. I'm sure somebody's done a PhD dissertation on that. You are all of a sudden, a better college. Now, again, I guess I'm revolutionary in this. I don't accept the notion to begin with that a high test score means a better student. But let's even assume that it did. Based on the selectivity measure, it doesn't matter what you actually do with the students once they get there. It doesn't matter whether you add value to those students' lives over the next 4 years. It's a simple equation. The better the student coming in, the better the college. I guess it would be as if the car companies were measured not by the quality of the cars they produce, but by the strength of the steel that they bring into their factories. There was a very thoughtful article, it was over a decade ago, in the New Yorker magazine that made this point quite nicely. It spoke in terms of the difference between modeling agencies and the Marines. I know you've been lying awake at night thinking about that, right? Modeling agencies are measured by how well they seek out and sign up the best models. No one pretends that the modeling agency makes them into better models. They just manage to attract the best ones. The focus for the Marines, on the other hand, is not the quality of the recruits coming in, but rather how that recruit is shaped and molded into a Marine while in training. Now, when you think about it, the rankings treat colleges as if we were modeling agencies. And if that is all we are, if we are just some elaborate sorting mechanism to help future employers find smart people, frankly, we could serve that function for tens of thousands of dollars less per student if we were just honest about it. In fact, when I was a law school dean, I remember a partner at a major law firm made precisely that point to me. He said to me, I hire students from the most prestigious law schools because I think they are so smart that whatever damage was done to them during their 3 years at law school could not have done much lasting harm. Even a measure like the graduation rate has a similar ramification. Now let's think about that for a moment, because who can oppose measuring a college's success based on its graduation rate? After all, the whole idea of going to college is ultimately to graduate. Although I'll tell you, actually, I think it is both to grow and to graduate. But clearly, graduation is important. But here is the problem with that measure for purposes of assessing an institution's quality. Every college administrator, every one of you knows that the cohorts of students coming in with the higher test scores have a higher graduation rate at the end of their 4 years. Those students with the lower test scores, now let's be clear, it's not because one is smarter and one isn't, but those students with the lower test scores, or those students without the family support, or those students who are the first generation in their families to go to college, or those students who are facing financial and other challenges while they are in college, meaning that they have to be working many, many hours in addition to their time in the library, all of them can be expected to have a relatively lower graduation rate. It's not because they are less smart, but they have other things going on in their lives. They have other pressures that don't enable them to perform as well or focus as much on college. Now, if a college matriculates a greater proportion of students from these more challenged groups, then presto, its graduation rate goes down. That's just how the numbers work. Even if it does better with those students than a competitor college, even if it does better with the higher test score students in graduation rate than a competitor college, if its mix of students is such that there are more of the other, its graduation rate can go down. So even when we look at graduation rate, which somehow seems to be more tied to what actually goes on during college, we may not be seeing what we think we are looking at. And even if we were, I think we all agree that it is best for all college students to learn and interact with students in a diverse environment. You know, we want you to meet other students from different socioeconomic strata. We want to mix those students for whom college was always the obvious and only option after high school with those for whom college was never an expectation and rarely considered a possibility. We want students of privilege to be mixed with students from poverty. It makes for richer discussion in the classroom, for a richer environment for all the students. But trying to quantify things like graduation rate often pushes away from precisely that kind of diversity. Now, let me admit to you something that presidents of colleges are told that they're never supposed to admit publicly. Brad, don't worry. We did an experiment this past year at Defiance College in terms of admissions. Our applications were up nicely, as I'm pleased to say they are again this year, and there was no question that we would not just meet budget, but it was clear we were going to actually exceed budget. Now, what does a college normally do when that happens? It feels that it can become more selective in terms of whom it is admitting. We did the opposite. That's right. We looked at the students who did not meet our admissions criteria. And our admissions committee looked at each one individually and asked itself the following question. If this student were admitted and got intensive tutoring, intensive mentoring, supplemental instruction, and a whole host of other services, basically everything we could think of, might this student have some potential that is not reflected in his or her test scores or his or her high school GPA that would enable the student to succeed in college? And we admitted 8 of those students. That's right, 8 students that did not meet our published admissions criteria. And as president of the college, I took every penny in additional incremental tuition from those students and I put it in a separate account to be used only to provide services to those students and 50 other incoming students whom we identified as being in need of additional services. And believe me, that was a lot more tutoring and a lot more mentoring for those 58 students. Yeah. Thank you. Now, how did those students do? And clearly, it's only we're in the second semester, but I can tell you how they did after the first semester. Of the 8, 1 of them didn't make it past the first semester, although I hear he may be interested in coming back next year. But most of the rest performed in a way that far exceeded their high school GPAs. In fact, we compared them to that control group of 50 students who had met our admissions criteria. And among those 58 students, of the top 6 GPAs after that first semester in college, of course, all of those, well over 3.0, 3 of the 6 were from these specially admitted students. Isn't that incredible? Now, I feel great that we provided this opportunity for these students. And in fact, let me tell you about one of them who came from a broken family. His father had not been in the picture for a long, long time. His older brother died suddenly just a few months before this student entered Defiance College. His mother pretty much kicked this student out of the house when he turned 18. And she still cannot understand why he ever thought that it would make sense to go to college. He has had his ups and his downs. He missed some classes, and we fell on him like a ton of bricks. I don't know if you all know, but our process is, at the college, the first class that any student misses, I as president find out about it that day. And if that student is a student athlete, their coach finds out about it that day. And the student finds out about that day. And when I was giving him a tough time for missing those classes, actually he looked me in the eye and he said, you know, this is the first time in my life that anybody ever really cared. And in another conversation, he said to me, I realized that if I were not at Defiance College, I would probably be in jail by now, because that's where most of my friends from high school are. And I'm happy to report that his academic performance is continuing to improve. In fact, just a few weeks ago, he came to me saying, I think it makes sense for me to stay on campus all summer and take some additional classes, because I realize I'm much better off spending the summer here than if I went back home. You know, this student is not just making it. The truth is he is going to excel. So yes, you know, we helped these students, but you know what? We also enriched ourselves. We made our campus more diverse in terms of economics and life stories and perspectives. Did our quote-unquote quality numbers go down because of these 8 students? Well, I guess mathematically they must have. But the quality of the discussion in our classrooms went up. And in fact, this experiment has been so successful in enriching the life of the campus that our faculty, right, who are the guardians, right, of those admissions criteria, our faculty recently voted to expand the program to up to 25 students next year. Now, I'm sure many of you in college admissions are saying that you just can't do something like this because it will hurt your numbers in future years. Yeah. And maybe some of you were applauding because you figured, oh, it'll hurt our numbers and that'll help. I don't know. You know? But let me assure you, it won't. In fact, our applications for this coming year are up, and the quote-unquote quality of our applications, you know, measured by those inaccurate but traditional factors, is up as well. But I must tell you honestly, even if they weren't up, I'm not sure why I should care. As president of a college, I have a really hard time turning my back on students with potential just because it might impact the way we are perceived. I would rather admit the student and focus on changing the perception. You know, I'm sure you realize that many of these measures, whether it be selectivity or graduation rate or retention rate, they all add up to the same pressures on a college that wants to do better in the rankings. Admit the students who are going to do well no matter where they attend. Admit the more privileged students. Admit the students with the higher test scores, regardless of how accurately that measures performance and potential. And of course, the corollary of that is the pressure to focus less on what happens during the 4 years of college, to focus less on the true quality of your program and how it is helping your students, and instead to focus on marketing and attracting the best students you can coming in. Act more like the modeling agency and less like the Marines. Now, let's be candid in admitting that there, of course, are other reasons to admit these better students. And of course, you know, we don't just want to admit any one group of student. We want the whole range of students. You know, those better students are more fun to teach because they get it in the classroom. Faculty members bond more easily with them because, after all, they remind us of ourselves, as we were good students in the classroom too. They have a support network at home which pressures them to do well in college, and that translates into less need for the college to provide a range of services. But while each college, when it reacts to those pressures, is perhaps acting rationally, given the rankings and the competitive nature of the marketplace, in focusing on these students, our society and our country are the losers for doing it. For the more we think and talk in these terms, the more we make a fundamental error, as we as a society confuse excellence on the one hand with exclusivity on the other. You know, too frequently, defining something as selective or as elite has become a shorthand way of describing it as excellent. How strange that is, and how perverse it is that our society makes that mistake when talking about educational institutions. After all, education is supposed to be the great leveler, the path to opportunity in a democratic society. When we confuse excellence and exclusivity, we are at war with our very essence, our very mission as educational institutions. If education is not supposed to be a path of opportunity, then what is it? If education is not the best way to reach those in need and help them climb the ladder of success, then what exactly is our purpose? We as educational institutions of higher learning, we as guidance counselors and admissions counselors alike, we should be able to join hands and speak with one voice about the importance of education and its link to opportunity. And frankly, when you think about the realities of today's financial world and the budgets that we are all dealing with, if we are not successful in terms of making that link between education and opportunity, we are going to be in some serious trouble. And yet so many of us are acting in a way that actually undercuts that very argument. If we are not willing to stand up to the pressures to conflate excellence and exclusivity, then who will? If we are not willing to tell students that college rankings do not define a college in the same way that class rankings do not define a student's potential, if we won't speak that truth, then who will? And you know, the truth is, there is another way. Take just a moment with me to imagine a different emphasis, a more productive focus. Let's imagine a scenario in which prospective students and their parents stop looking at colleges in terms of rankings and colleges stop looking at students in terms of numbers. Let's imagine together a world in which the search is not for each student to find the best college, but rather for each student to find the best college for that particular student. In fact, I challenge all of you in this room to think of all of the colleges you have visited and start making a list in your mind of the special ways those colleges have touched you, the ways they have impressed you. I would venture that you would have to get pretty far down that list before you get to a quality that can be quantified or captured through a rankings process. Yes, there is another way. And look, I do not mean to claim that we at Defiance College are superior and have somehow found that other way. We have not. I think that many of the colleges represented in this room, colleges from all around Ohio, have blazed new paths in innovative programming, paths that do help students grow as individuals, that do offer new opportunities. You know, how about if we focus on those when talking with students rather than on our rankings or theirs? You know, there is indeed another way. And I think it offers a wide range of rich approaches that are true to our educational mission. And let me just describe for you for a few moments some of the elements. You know, again, I obviously know the situation at Defiance better, that we've put in place at Defiance that reflect that other way. Again, not because we are the only ones. We aren't, but because obviously I know our example the best. And I hope that before the evening is out that you'll sit and talk to each of the college representatives at your own tables and give them an opportunity to talk about the ways that they have put some of these things in motion. You know, the other way, in my mind, the non-rankings way, it starts with individual attention. Now, I must admit I'm kind of strange as president of a college. I am proud to say that every prospective student who comes to visit our campus comes as part of that visit to the president's house, where we sit down individually together and chat. I have an opportunity to get to know that prospective student a little. We sit, we talk, then we go down in the basement and we play some ping pong. I've actually gotten pretty good at ping pong. Now, sometimes I'm out of town when a student comes, so if you send a student and he or she doesn't meet with me, it's just because I wasn't there. You know, we also speak about that student's favorite flavor of ice cream. I somehow seem to feel that if I'm eating ice cream with the students, the calories don't count. And I've become well known around campus for going into residence halls, knocking on doors, and dragging students out for ice cream. In fact, last night, you know, which was pretty warm, I think I paid for 29 ice creams at Cold Stone, which I must say gives me a discount because I am so good for business. Yeah. Of course, you know, taking the students for ice cream, playing ping pong with them, it's a lot of fun for me, but there is an important side benefit. It makes students feel comfortable coming to me as president or going to other administrators or faculty or coaches with their issues. And the truth is that when the students and I are standing on line at Cold Stone Creamery or batting a ping pong ball back and forth together, they will say things to me that, frankly, they wouldn't say otherwise. It just sets a tone in terms of the kind of supporting environment that I want them to feel that they're in. You know, this personal focus then continues on an institutional level. This past year, we started a new process which we call the PSP. That stands for Personal Success Plan for Student. Every new student, they come to orientation before they start. And each student sits down with a team of people. A faculty member, a coach if that student is a student athlete, an alum, dean or vice president of the college, somebody from career services, student life. I tell them it's a little like, the Verizon commercial in which you buy the cell phone and you have the network standing behind you. This is part of the network. And that team has a conversation with them. What do you want to accomplish academically while you're at the college? What do you want to accomplish extracurricularly? Although I don't think that's a word. What kinds of skills do you want to get that will give you a leg up in the marketplace or in getting into grad school? What kinds of internship experiences? What kinds of contacts do you want to make? How do you want to grow as a person? How do you want to grow spiritually and ethically and culturally and in terms of developing your leadership potential and building character? What kinds of diverse and other cultural experiences do you want to be exposed to you may not have had an opportunity to take advantage of? How many students do you think know the answers to those questions? No, actually, there's always one who thinks he does. But of course they don't. But that's fine because it's the beginning of the conversation. We then talk about it some more with them when they start, when they move in, and then they take a course called Freshman Seminar. And one of the things that happens in Freshman Seminar is we help them figure out how to answer those questions for themselves. So at the end of that first semester, when they go home, for the holidays, they have with them their personal success plan. It is a set of documents which is essentially their strategic plan for the next 4 years. What needs to happen to make sure they are the most productive 4 years you could imagine, and also, of course, the most enjoyable, because college is supposed to be fun also. Can they change what's in their PSP? Of course they can. And as you know, the vast majority of students will change their majors at least once when they're at college. But it gives us a way that we literally sit down with them every semester to assess together how things are going. Are there things the college needs to do better to help them achieve their goals? Are there things that they need to do better? Now, I was here last year speaking at a panel, and I mentioned that we were just about to start this. And a number of the guidance counselors said to me, come back and report on how it worked. So let me just give you a couple of numbers. We survey our students to assess how helpful they have found the PSP experience to be. For example, we asked students to respond to the comment that my PSP process was friendly and helpful. They had 5 choices: strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Literally every student, that is 100% either agreed or strongly agreed, and of those 100%, 84% strongly agreed. The same was the case when we asked students whether the PSP was a valuable part of their Defiance College experience. Again, 100% either agreed or strongly agreed, and I guess we slipped on that. 83% strongly agreed rather than the 84%. Now, this kind of personal attention, and I know different colleges do it in different ways, it can never get reflected in the rankings. But it sure is an important step toward a fulfilling and a value-added college experience. But there must be more to college in this non-rankings world than just the personal attention, important as that is. We also need to provide true excellence in the classroom, excellence that's not linked with exclusivity, and to link that excellence with the realities of the world beyond. We at Defiance College are very much a college in the liberal arts tradition, as are many of the colleges that are represented here. We take the liberal arts canon seriously as a key component of our fundamental mission, which is, after all, academics. We believe, as I'm sure many of you do, that students need to be connected to a core of common knowledge that helps define what it is to be an educated person in today's society. We believe that there really is a meaningful connection between the thoughts of the past and the promise of the future. Now, I know some of you may be hearing from parents who question the value of the liberal arts. especially as they're focused on the jobs that they want their students to be getting their sons or daughters to be getting in 4 years. But I would hope that many of those questions have been answered by recent economic experiences, which have, I believe, made clear how valuable a broad base of knowledge is. After all, during a storm, it is the trees with the broadest root systems that survive. And especially in a world defined by today's economic storms, our students need that broad root system not just to survive, but also to thrive. But the knowledge is not enough. You know, I think there has been an unfortunate dichotomy in higher education in which many have assumed that you have to make a choice. Either teach theory or teach practice. Either be a liberal arts college or a vocational college. I think that's a false dichotomy. If we truly are to add the greatest value for the greatest number of students during college, we have to find a way for colleges to do both, teach both theory and practice. After all, one of the best ways to learn is to take what you have done in the classroom and then apply it to real-life situations. So that's why we now have, for example, something called the DC Business Advantage Program, in which our business majors actually run and manage their own business. That's why our students in criminal justice, forensic science, and digital forensics have begun investigating cold cases for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office through our Cold Case Initiative. You know, our students worked last year on a homicide case. They have to actually sign confidentiality agreements because they're handling confidential prosecutorial documents. And I know they take it seriously because last year I asked one of the students who was working on the homicide case how it was going. And he basically said to me, you know, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Yeah. That's why our students in graphic design started something called Creating Defiance, in which they run an actual graphic design studio. Or our computer students started something called DC PC Solutions, in which they provide computer repair services in the area. You know, every college represented in this room could mention similar initiatives at their institution. And yet not one such initiative can get reflected meaningfully in any kind of ranking methodology. You know, the same is true with service. Service is, I think, another area where we need to put our heads together to reimagine the college experience. You who are guidance counselors know even better than I how much service experience high school students already engage in. I know they do it for lots of reasons. They learn from it. Sometimes it's required. And I know they do it because they think it looks good on their college applications. And colleges have, over the past decade or two, picked up on the importance of service for students. But I think in many cases, we have all just replicated the same kinds of service experiences that students have had in high school. You know, build a house, clean up a park, volunteer at a nursing home. That is wonderful stuff, of course. But as colleges, I think we have the challenge to go even further in at least two different ways. Initially, students need to move from volunteering in service to actually managing service operations. And there are, of course, different ways to do this. The way we've chosen to do it at Defiance is we have actually created an actual student-run nonprofit. It's separately incorporated under the laws of the state of Ohio. It's named Project 701 because our address is 701 North Clinton. You're now among the very few people in the world who understand where Project 701 got its name. It gives students an opportunity to actually run a nonprofit. The students are on the board of directors. The executive director of this nonprofit is a student. The CFO of this nonprofit is a student. The project managers are students. And what great things they have done already, from research for the Susan G. Komen Foundation on the incidence of breast cancer in Northwest Ohio, to getting the hospitals in town to partner with them to jointly offer a free primary care clinic on the third Saturday of every month. What a great opportunity for our pre-med, nursing, social work, and other students. Or our business students creating through Project 701 a microfinance lending operation in Jamaica, in the Caribbean. Or other students partnered with United Way to provide backpacks for children in school lunch programs to take home food over the weekends. You know, while we're giving students these entrepreneurial opportunities, we also need to be raising their sights, opening their minds, broadening their perspectives. They will, as you know, live and operate in a global world, and they need some familiarity with their role as global citizens. And again, every college here has a way to introduce its students to the world beyond. Ours is something we call DC Global, in which we actually guarantee every incoming full-time student, that if that student successfully completes the full 4-year program at Defiance, that they will be guaranteed an international opportunity while a student, during their junior or senior year. And I tell the parents, you're going to pay for the passport, you'll pay for some incidentals, but basically in their junior or senior year, that's going to be on our dime. It might be a service trip to Belize or Cambodia or Ghana. It might be traveling with faculty in their major overseas. It could be a range of opportunities. But it's vitally important that every student get the opportunity to encounter the world beyond our borders. Now, here again, our colleagues at other colleges in Ohio are doing great things to expose their students to the world around us, and none of those things get reflected in the rankings. You look at all these things together, the truth is there is indeed another way. We can together begin to reimagine higher education in a way that focuses more on the individual and how to give that student the most value added possible during his or her college experience. And again, none of these things, not the personal attention, not the PSP, not running a nonprofit, not investigating cold cases, not the international service experience or the Liberal Arts Foundation, none of them will ever be reflected in any ranking, no matter how well-meaning that ranking might be. These kinds of programs help the best students and the weakest alike. They will make their educational experiences even more valuable and indeed special. But they just are not quantifiable in that rankings sort of way. You all play a vital role in this process. I know how hard you try to get students to focus on what is right for them, to find the right fit, or as this year's conference theme indicates, to make the right move. And I know the pressures under which you operate as students and parents and our society and culture all push toward the most prestigious credential rather than the most valuable college experience. I truly do believe, however, that working together we can make a difference here. I do believe that we can help our society recognize that there is a big difference between elitism and excellence. I think that we all, colleges, admissions counselors, guidance counselors, you and I, we now have a real and important role to play on a national stage in standing up for excellence as measured on its own terms. The measure of an educational institution should not be related to the extent to which it admits only the few, but rather to the extent to which it broadens opportunity for those who attend. Excellence should be measured by how a college helps students, how it challenges students, how it draws connections for students, how it provides analytical frameworks for lifelong learning for students. Excellence is related to successfully opening doors for students so they can take their places in society, not by one's success in denying admission to as many students as possible. Now, you might have figured out that I'm pretty passionate about this. And there's a personal reason why I care so much about this. My mother, who is no longer with us, was born in Germany in 1931. One of her earliest memories was standing in the playground, she was about in kindergarten, while the other children held hands in a circle, but they would not include her because Nazism had taken hold and she was a Jew. She and her family were lucky enough to escape and make it to the United States. And they taught me, as did my father and his family, which had escaped the pogroms of Eastern Europe a generation earlier, about the importance of education. In a world in which everything you own can be taken from you, what you possess inside your head and your heart remains with you still. An educated population provides the crucial framework for democracy and for liberty. And the thought that an educational institution's prestige in our country is now based on its ability to close that circle, to keep students out, rather than its commitment to letting them in, corrodes the very essence of what education is supposed to be, to offer, and to achieve. The very fact that I can stand before you today, completing my second year as the president of Defiance College, says something wonderful about education in our country. Where else could you find a college that would choose as its president a Jewish fellow married to a Lutheran woman who was the dean of a Catholic law school and is now the president of a United Church of Christ college? Yeah. When we draw the circle of opportunity, we must aim to include as many as we can. Our voice on behalf of opportunity and excellence is one that we need to raise on a national stage. And I know you raise that voice every day in countless meetings with administrators, with students, and with parents, and I know you do it against some pretty serious odds. It's not easy to make the right move. But after all, that's exactly what we preach to our students all the time. I mean, think about it. We're about to enter now graduation season, right? And many of us, we could recite almost with our eyes closed what our commencement speakers are going to say. We're going to tell the students to buck peer pressure. We're going to tell them to sail against the wind. We're going to urge them to be people of character. But then, after the lofty speeches about courage and ethics at graduation have faded away, after the robes and the pomp and circumstance are all put back into storage, we face our own pressures. Guidance counselors pressured by parents and principals to show how many students were admitted into quote-unquote the top colleges. College admissions counselors pressured by, let me see if I get the whole list for you, pressured by boards of trustees, pressured by presidents, pressured by vice presidents, pressured by deans to break new records each year in terms of selectivity. In each case, people pressured to play or beat the numbers game, people pressured to focus on quantitative factors rather than qualitative ones, people pressured to deal with overall averages rather than the uniqueness of each individual with whom we are lucky enough to deal. You know, those great students whom we all admit and cherish, the ones that do so much to excel in the classroom, to improve the life of the campus, to make us all proud, you know, they are not trophies of our prowess in the marketplace. They represent instead a sacred trust on behalf of us as educational institutions to challenge them, to enable them to grow and flourish in ways they never imagined. And the same is true of those students whose glistening potential is somewhat tarnished by lower scores, whose shining futures are obscured by a family environment that provided moral support that was less enthusiastic and financial support that was less generous. They too are a sacred trust for us and our society. They too have potential. They just need more of our love and support for them to be able to unlock it. They too can flourish. They just need more nurturing and learning for them to realize it themselves. You know what they need? They need education. And that is exactly what we are supposed to provide. How did it happen that we decided that the path to higher education was a competition in which the way to get into quote-unquote the best schools is to show that you don't really need them? Why do we define a quote-unquote good school as one which seems not to feel that it can educate those most in need of learning? You know, it's awfully strange when you think about it. As someone pointed out to me, would we ever dream of defining the best doctors as those who limit their practices to only those who are the healthiest? You know, can't you imagine seeing, Jerry Seinfeld doing a whole shtick on that? Oh, that's a great hospital. Never lets any sick people past the front door. Grandma wants to get in. She keeps working on the blood pressure test to see if she can pass. Or would we ever dream of defining the best mechanics as those who only let into their shops the cars that are already running the best? I'd take my car there, but I just don't think it's going to be admitted. That's what we do in education. How is it that we have allowed excellence in education to be defined in such a perverse way? Yes, this goes beyond the rankings, but the rankings are a wonderful exemplar of how far we have permitted the conversation to stray. We do a disservice to the best students and the most challenged together when we define education as a competition in which only a few can get in. We serve neither of them well when we make higher education a reward rather than a stepping stone. And we do a disservice to society when we permit education to be defined as a scarce commodity that must be rationed, a circle of elite that must somehow be protected from those who are not deemed worthy. And again, especially in today's budget environment, if education is seen as just the privilege of the elite, I can't begin to imagine what will happen to the funding for it. That circle out of which my mother was kept on that playground back in Nazi Germany, it needed to be opened then in a particularly urgent and ultimately tragic setting. But in our far more blissful and blessed lives and environment today, the work of opening circles and expanding opportunity remains both vital and sacred. Please join me in helping us see beyond the numbers. Please join me in reminding parents and high school students, colleges, and other college presidents that neither colleges nor students can or should be defined as numbers. Please join me in opening not just the circle of opportunity, but in broadening minds, raising sights, and opening hearts as well. Thank you so much for all you do in our common effort in making the right move for our students. And thank you so much for your patience and hospitality in inviting me to spend some time with you today. Thank you.